right. It's just a quick little update. It's just a quick little update. Yeah. I'm looking scraggly because this is a quick little update. I'm in the yard doing some yard work, but I just wanted to tap in because I had an interesting consultation today with somebody from the Patreon, and the conversation went towards. So here's the question, right? What it would just throw it out there. Like, what's your thoughts on, you know, going to the emergency room and, emergency room status and, like that kind of idea. So there's a lot of conversation now around this concept of boarding, right? I don't know if people know the concept, right? But there's a lot of conversation in the health space around boarding. So obviously I'm doing this video, so it's just kind of like, okay, get ready because we will discuss it more often in the coming series, right? But in the short term, before it escaped from my memory, I said, let me just touch the airwaves. Let me just touch the airwaves with it. Yeah, let me just touch the airwaves with it, and get the pulse from the people, or just exchange, or just maybe just make folks aware that we are going to discuss it. But boarding has been something that's been like a personal thing to me for a long time, and people that have been watching me for the longest know the terminology, though. So the terminology boarding, I just recently became aware that there's a terminology for it, boarding, right? But technically what it talks about is emergency rooms and hospitals being overloaded, and people sitting in the hospitals from in the emergency rooms or emergency departments for hours, days, maybe in some wild instances, like more than a week, waiting for a room upstairs in the hospital to receive treatment. Now, with my family from Harlem and being born and raised in the Bronx, I had firsthand knowledge, firsthand experience. Um, Lincoln Hospital, Bronx, Lebanon, Harlem Hospital. Um, there were times where the emergency rooms just looked like, especially for a lot of us growing up in the neighborhood, like children going to school, or maybe you just out and about. It looked like nothing but heroin addicts, dope fiends, crackheads, winos, homeless. Like, it looked crazy. So however you interpreted that or internalized that, you develop this idea that the last place you wanted to be was like in the emergency room. So I think that, coupled with our parents and our parents' parents, just general distrust of the medical system, the hospital system. And so people just, they just didn't, people still don't go to the hospital. You know what I'm saying? Like people still don't go to the hospital. And obviously that's not the way. That's not the way to, that's not the way to go about, to handle that. Boarding. Yeah, that's what they board. Yo, bro. Listen, that's a term right there. That's a very I think that was one of those things that might have just been like a slang, like euphemistically just throwing that out there, and then after a while, like somebody call you a name to annoy you, like they trolling or they trying to get on you or get at you. And then after a while, that name just sticks, and that's now your name. You know what I'm saying? Like I think that's how boarding came about. But like I said, being from the Bronx, and Harlem, long before, 2019, long before this situation, this was just for us, this just kind of how, this was how it was. This just how we thought, until you see other things or until you learn other things, you don't know any better than what you experience. So we just thought this was how it was, and so people grow up with different ideas on how to, different ideas on how to handle that, you know what I'm saying, or how your approach to that is going to be. Obviously, this is my approach, right? This is my approach. Now, a lot of people don't get the idea of politics, politics and, health and being healthy as a form of civil rights. A lot of people don't get that concept yet, you know what I'm saying? But we're going to press the issue. Because that needs to be a part of the political conversation. Shout out to my guy, Architect. He sent me a video clip with a young Black liberal, right? And it always makes me cringe watching these girls looking like they're coming off of a machine, like a printing press. Look like I'm pro everything that's chaos, and I'm going to question everything that sounds like order and, organization. I'm gonna just, and I'm gonna go viral off of this foolishness, but she was questioning the idea of the leader of our military being physically fit. She was questioning that idea. And while I totally understand how you can't be like a caveman, we don't need a dumb athlete running military, because military, especially now, right? Military is lazy now. Military is not swords and arrows, and it's not even guns and grenades anymore. It's like, who sank my battleship? You know what I'm saying? Military now, wars are fought electronically. You know what I'm saying? They're using drones and guided missiles and stuff like that. So it's not really about, but so you definitely, I'm saying all that to say, I definitely understood her side of the conversation in terms of push-ups not being the complete, like that's not the end all be all. Just because you could do 1,000 push-ups doesn't mean you're qualified to run a military, right? I get that, right? Disclaimer, I'm laying that out there first. But here's the thing. I don't care how smart you are. I'm going to need you to be able to knock some of them push-ups out, though, in order to be the leader of the military. Period. I'm going to need you to be able to knock them push-ups out. Now, if you want to argue the leader of the military should be, you know, diverse in terms of black, white, Indian, Chinese, Asian, Spanish, Puerto Rican. Like, if you want to argue that, sure, go crazy. If you want to argue man, woman, in between, go crazy. But not being physically fit, and even worse, not having a standard of being physically fit, to me sounds like that's insane in order to be able to lead a military. Like just lead a military. Like, how do you have a military and the military's not in shape? And how can you lead an in shape group if you're not in some reasonable amount of shape yourself? Right? So you know, but all of these things are political. All of these things are, you know, part and parcel of the reason why we need to have conversations, you know, about politics, because largely the stuff we discuss every day is the most important stuff, and it's not a part of the running conversation, right? And so going back to the emergency room situation, from my experience, and when I say my experience, I'm adding on to what I saw just growing up in the neighborhood. I'm adding on to that with traveling city to city. You know, before I became a naturopath, when I was going city to city, hospital to hospital, emergency room. Yeah, I would spend a lot of my time in emergency rooms, you know, oncology wards, you know, talking to GYN doctors. For the most part, right? Doctors get a bad rap. I know people don't want to hear that, but there's a lot of politics around hospitals. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of politics around healthcare. And if we ignore the politics, technically we're ignoring the healthcare. So I think directly what we're doing in terms of the curriculum and the course is a big part of it. Because if you take out the people that are like living in the emergency rooms and outside the emergency rooms, you know, there's a lot of people that don't need to be in the emergency room. A lot of things that could have been done, taken care of, prevented at the house, right? So so yeah, we're doing our part that way. You know, we're doing our part that way. That's my thought on it. You know what I'm saying? My thought on it is the way to prevent it is for people to get busy with the get busy at the crib, right? Get busy with the get busy at the crib. Now, for a long time, that sounded crazy. For a long time, that sounded crazy. Primarily because in the holistic space, you don't really have people, like, people aren't certified. They think certification is goofy. You know what I'm saying? Like, they believe. And it's not even a matter of certification. It's just, certification just mean you studied somewhere, right? So it's really the fact that, you know, people like allergic to reading. Like, people are allergic to books, you know. So that's our thing. You know what I'm saying? We're just trying to raise the literacy level. And as we raise the literacy level, I feel like we're going to do, because we can't help, respectfully, you know what I'm saying? And we're not trying to, you know what I'm saying? We can't, if you're, like I always say, if your child falls down on a skateboard and busts their head, they need stitches, right? But on the same token, if your child falls down, busts their head, and they need stitches, you don't want to be like number 31 in the emergency room behind, you know, behind 30 people where 20 of those people don't even belong there. You know what I'm saying? And that's where the part of, like iotropic incidents, I think, goes up. And iotropic incidents are hospital driven mistakes, infections, etc. I think that's where that comes in. You know what I'm saying? You got it's like public school system. You got one old teacher, one old lady in there with 35 children that's hyped up on sugar. Like it's not possible for that lady to do a good job, right? So it's the same thing going on in the emergency room. You have a bunch of interns, and remember, the larger part of my journey with this now, God was grooming me from the beginning, but the larger part of my journey with this started with an overworked nurse falling to sleep after at the wheel because she just did 3 shifts and running over my daughters. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. So my thing is, I want to finish up before we move on. You know what I'm saying? Because we have a lot to move on to. I want to finish up um the Ebers Papyrus, right? Because the biggest mystery left, and I got a couple people asked me about it on Patreon, you know what I'm saying? But I was trying to let everybody catch up. I know people at different places with their studies. Um, the herbs, right? The herbs and the application of the herbs, right? We know it's like 1,000 different herbs. It's just it's hundreds of herbs that they were using, but um a lot of those are kind of mystery. So we want to do our best to um uncover a good portion of just some of the basic information that has survived to this day in terms of how to apply some basic stuff at the house. So we want to dig deeper into the Ebers Papyrus in a practical herbal kind of sense. But yeah. So all of that comes together. You know what I'm saying? So digging deeper into the Ebers Papyrus combined with what we're trying to do in terms of heal the world, make it a better place. I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it. I'm still working on the Ebers Papyrus. I'm trying to. I got a lot of what I want to, want to talk about in terms of how I want to write it up. It's just I don't know whether to go forwards or backwards. You know what I'm saying? Because you have two popular styles, right? You have the style where you just basically put a bunch of herbs and you just talk about, aspects of the herbs. And then you have, which is what I'm leaning more towards, right? Situations. I think that's worked best for us. Like with the Eat Right for Your Haplotype and then the Constitution book. So something in the format like similar to that format where we go through situations, you know what I'm saying? Asthma, this, that, and the other, and just talk about the applications. Like basically like how the Ebers Papyrus is. That's why I'm leaning more towards that, because that's how the Ebers Papyrus is. The Ebers Papyrus is basically patients and the Sunu or the doctors, and Patient has blah, 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 blah. Doctor is applying this, that, and the other, boo, 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 boo. You know what I'm saying? So similar to that format is the way I think I want to go with it. Bro, it's crazy. And the problem is this is the boarding issue. This what you talking about is the boarding issue, but listen, they violate the nurses. Let me explain this to you. They violate the nurses. The nurses is the buffers. The nurses get thrown under the bus, you know, and again, let me say this again. With my personal story, I should be the first person to throw nurses under the bus. Nurses ran over my daughters. A nurse went to sleep at the wheel, coming off of 3 straight shifts, and ran over my children. So I know people at home, they're watching, I don't know, Chicago MD or all these different medical shows, Grey's Anatomy or whatever, but none of that stuff is real until it hits your house. That's why people play with their health so much, because we're born with a sense of invincibility, you know, until you feel vulnerable, you know. But it's not really the nurses. You know what I'm saying? The nurses is like GOAT level. You know what I'm saying? The nurses is the main ones holding it down. You know, what's really happening is the pyramid is upside down. The pyramid is upside down. So the way the pyramid is supposed to work, right, is you're supposed to have interns. Then on top of the interns, you're supposed to have residents. Then on top of the residents, you're supposed to have fellows. And then on top of the fellows, you have your attending, right? So if you notice, the name of the main book for the Kemetic Naturopathy launch, right, is Fellow of the Craft, right? Fellow of the Craft. That's an ancient term that stuck with us from Kemet through Masonry into modern medicine. That hasn't went anywhere, right? So the intern is basically the children that's just coming out of school, young adults fresh out of school. You know, technically they're doctors, but they haven't really did their experience-based learning yet, right? So a lot of times people discount experience, but experience still counts. Experience still counts. You know what I'm saying? Is you got to go to college, you got to go to medical school, but you're not official tissue until you get that experience. So you got to do your intern, your residency. And then after you complete that, right, now you're a resident. And then if you go into specialization, you would be considered like a fellow, because you're basically starting over your internship, but you're starting it under a specialist. You know what I'm saying? And if you don't go into specialization, then you would be like attending, you know. But the pyramid is upside down, right? So ideally, what you want to have is a bunch of attending physicians, right? A bunch of attending physicians, a bunch of fellows, a bunch of attendings, right? And then you want to have a few residents, and then you want to have a sprinkle of interns in there learning, right? But what's happening is the exact opposite. What's happening is the opposite. You have a lot of interns, a lot of interns, and then on top of the interns, you got the residents, and then a lot of time the fellows and the attendings, they off somewhere focused on some money. You know what I'm saying? They off somewhere focused on some money. And you know, I don't mean like outside the hospital, but the hospital is broken down like into a ghetto and a suburb. You know what I'm saying? And the emergency room is the ghetto, and you trying to like come up, you struggling to like make it make it out the hood. You trying to get a room, you know what I'm saying, where the real doctors is. And you know, it's crazy. It's crazy, you know what I'm saying? But in that scenario, when things go wrong, it's nurses that get, you know, they throw the nurses under the bus, you know what I'm saying? But typically the nurses are working around the clock so much because of the doctor shortage. You know, the doctor shortage, and you know, to me, it couples with the lack of education in terms of people with their regular health. You know what I'm saying? You got um the other day, I don't even know what doctor show it was, but I was laughing. God forgive me. But I was laughing, you know, because they paused the show and asked me, what should I do? You know, what would I do if somebody said something, you know, they had a pain in their chest because they vaped like 2 packs of vapes or 3 packs of vapes. I don't even know how vape goes. It's like a vape pack is the equivalent of a pack of cigarettes, right? And so on the show, a person had like 3 vape packs at a party, and the next day they was in the emergency room, right? So for me, that falls under the lack of education, take care of yourself group. You know what I'm saying? Like, because people don't understand, they think vape is somehow like some other thing, you know, and then they're flavored, fruity, you know, grape, you know, whatever. They, you know, so people not really thinking that these are like concentrated cigarettes. They're not thinking these are like concentrated cigarettes until these kids in the emergency room. You know what I'm saying? So I would approach it the same way I approach everything else, is information. You know what I'm saying? But people just don't have it. As simple as that sounds, you know, and that doesn't make it simple to handle the addiction part. Because once people are addicted to nicotine, it doesn't matter if they got addicted to nicotine through cigarettes or through vapes or whatever. They're addicted now. They're hooked. The thing is, you know, making information like this, just these libraries that we're building, like making this a part of people's houses. So everybody has the information. You know what I'm saying? Like, the most prevalent and pressing information that your child has when they're about to smoke their first cigarette or be introduced to their first hookah or vape, it shouldn't be peer pressure. You know, it should be, you know, it should be. All right, family, it's prayer time.